Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing my really weird May wrap-up video for you. I had such a strange reading month in May. I feel like I was killing it from January until April, and then I got a little bit burned out and I kind of wanted to just take a break from reading as much, and then I read a ton anyway, but I really did not read very many novels this month. I read a lot more graphic novels and manga. So I'm going to talk about all of the novels that I read in the beginning, and then I'll talk about the graphic novels and manga afterward. And the reason that I also say that this was a weird reading month is because I didn't even rate everything that I was reading. I did rate all of the novels, but there was a bunch of manga that I was reading specifically that was really just for enjoyment, and I wasn't trying to be critical about at all. I was just like, this is entertaining. I'm gonna read all of these volumes. So for those, I'm really gonna like tell you what the series is about, but not really go in depth about any kind of critical thoughts because I didn't have any. I just, like I said, was reading them for enjoyment. So this was a weird month. But it did start off with a bang because the first book that I read was The Coldest Girl in Coldtown by Holly Black, and I loved it. This is a vampire novel, and it follows a girl named Tana who wakes up after this party and she's just surrounded by corpses. There was a vampire attack and everyone who was there got either killed or bitten and infected. And in this world, vampires do exist, but they are quarantined essentially in a place called Coldtowns, and there are all these cold towns set up for people who have been bitten and who might be infected, and it's a place for them to go and try to kind of ride out the disease. And I thought that it was a really interesting take on vampires. Holly had a very like scientific way of explaining how someone is turned from human into vampire and how they might not necessarily survive that initial like infection that they get and how it gets worse and worse as it goes on. I also really liked the family aspect of this book. Tana had a mother who was infected by the disease, and that definitely played a big part in her reactions and the way that she understood what was kind of going on around her and in some of the decisions that she made. I thought that she was a really interesting character, and she immediately trusts this one vampire, and they kind of team up to get to this cold town together, and each of them has their own motivations in going there. Her ex-boyfriend's the worst ever, just saying. Did not like him. But it was a really enjoyable read, and I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, but I thought that it was just so well done. It was like a huge surprise to me. And the funny thing too is that in June we started Fairy-a-thon, which is our read-along of Holly Black books leading up to the release of The Queen of Nothing, and I actually read The Coldest Girl in Coldtown before we even thought of putting together Fairy-a-thon. So it's like I started my Holly Black read-along a month early. And like I said, I really love this. I thought this was just such a great vampire novel, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. It was very bloody, so if you are like squeamish at all, I would stay away from this, but it was so great. Then I read The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. As you guys know, Name of the Wind is like my favorite fantasy book pretty much ever. I love it so much, and Patrick has said numerous times that even if you love Name of the Wind, The Slow Regard of Silent Things might not be for you. It's told from the character Ori's perspective, and I was like, yeah, like I love your books. I'm gonna love this book. Come on. So I read it. Did not like it. I was really surprised because, like I said, Name of the Wind is like one of my favorite books ever. I love Wise Man's Fear too, but this book just did not do it for me. So while it was interesting to see a week inside Ori's head and her like life while she's waiting in between visits from Quoth, I just never felt comfortable there. I never felt comfortable getting her narrative, and it just didn't click for me. I liked getting a deeper look at the Underthing and like getting to see a little bit more of the underground world, and also I of course appreciated the Easter eggs to the main series that were in here, but I just didn't like it. I much prefer Quoth to Ori. I definitely have theories about Ori for the third and final book. I'm sad, but this just was not for me, and I ended up giving this 2 stars, if you can believe it. Then I read The Waking Forest by Alyssa Wees, and this is another one that I just didn't really like, and I was really disappointed by that because the beginning was so promising, and the premise sounds so good. There's this witch who lives in a magical forest and she grants wishes, and then one day this mysterious boy shows up and he starts asking her what she would wish for, and it makes her think about things that she has suppressed and didn't necessarily want to confront. And then we also get the perspective from a girl who is living with a whole bunch of sisters, and that is really the perspective that I didn't like. So in the beginning, I was really interested in the witch's perspective, but sadly, those sections were like really short. They would be like 1 to 3 pages, and then the contemporary portion of the girl and her sisters who were living like just outside the forest were a lot longer and kind of boring. And also I felt like it was really hard to differentiate one sister from another sister aside from the main sister, and I just like couldn't get into it. Like I was really into the witches parts, and then I really like couldn't with the other stuff. This book really tried to do a lot, and I just don't think it was executed very well. Like it definitely got more interesting as it went on. It was obviously interesting enough that I finished it instead of DNFing it, but I just couldn't ever get into it. I just never felt like I fully had a grasp of what was going on, and while you kind of aren't supposed to in the beginning, I felt like I should have understood things a little bit more than I did while I was reading. The ending was interesting, but overall I just didn't love it, and I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. Then I read Catalyst by James Luceno, which is a Star Wars novel, and this is Catalyst, a Rogue One story, so this actually takes place before Rogue One, and it follows Jyn Erso's dad, Galen Erso, and his wife, Lyra. And Lyra is amazing, and it makes me so mad that we didn't get more of her in Rogue One because she was so awesome in this book. We also get Galen's perspective, and then we get Orson Krennic's perspective. Orson is like the guy who was developing everything going on with the Death Star. Him and Galen were actually like friends before everything happened, and they end up starting to work together, but Orson's not really telling Galen the truth about things, and Galen doesn't want to be on either side of this war between the Separatists and the Republic, but he kind of gets thrust front and center because he is such a brilliant scientist and he's being lied to. And Lyra is definitely picking up on more of what's going on. And then we also get to see like baby Jyn Erso, and we get to find out about like Galen starting to call her Stardust, and it's really cute. It was a really well done novel, and I also really appreciated the Easter eggs in here, and there was a reference to Rebels, which was really exciting. But overall, it was not my favorite Star Wars novel that I have read so far. I thought that it was interesting, I thought that it was a good story, and I definitely liked getting more of the Ersos and also of Krennic, I guess, but I think I would have liked to have read it before I saw the film because I already knew like Krennic is not a good guy, and I think I would have enjoyed it more maybe not knowing that, because as soon as he had the perspective, I was just like, ugh, this guy. I would say it was a solid book. It was a solid story within the Star Wars universe. It just wasn't my favorite, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. And then I also listened to Phasma by Delilah S. Dawson on audio. This is another Star Wars novel, and this one follows Captain Phasma from the newest trilogy, so it's definitely jumping a bit in the timeline. I'd really wanted to get to this one because I've wanted to read a book by Delilah S. Dawson for quite a while, and also I think Phasma is a really interesting character, and she never gets the screen time that she deserves. So going along with that, I did think it was kind of interesting that despite this book being called Phasma, and it definitely was about Phasma, but we did not get Phasma's perspective in this story. This story was told by Vi Marati, who is a pilot. She was relaying stories that she collected about Phasma's past to Cardinal, who was like pretty much ranked the same as Phasma, except he was the person that would like train all the stormtroopers, and then they would get sent to Phasma to actually like go into battle. And he despises Phasma, and he didn't like that she rose so quickly within the ranks, so he's trying to find out information about her to expose her to the First Order. And it was really exciting, and he had Vi Marati held as a prisoner aboard the Absolution, and she was the one that was relaying the stories. And yeah, I really liked the dynamic between them. I thought Cardinal was a really interesting character, and it definitely was really cool to get to know more about Phasma's past, and it explained the decision that she made in Force Awakens. But I really would have liked to get Phasma's perspective. That's really what I was going into this like hoping to get, and I didn't. She definitely had a very challenging life, and there are definitely reasons for the way that she is, and I appreciated reading those. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Now moving on to comics and manga. I read Princess Leia by Mark Waid. This is the Princess Leia comic. There's only like 4 or 5 issues in this limited series. It follows Princess Leia and it takes place right after the events of A New Hope. So like the first panel actually was that same scene, like where they're getting the medals, and it picks up like right there. So you get a continuation. You get to see Leia kind of dealing with her parents' deaths because she doesn't really get to process that much in the film. I thought it did a really good job of showing how passionate Leia actually is about her people. She really cares about the Alderaanians, and she really risked a lot to kind of go throughout the galaxy and try to preserve the culture. Leia is like one of my favorite characters of all time, and her actions in this are so admirable, and she like ends up kind of befriending this pilot that has these preconceived notions about her, and Leia totally turns that around, and it was just a really enjoyable, contained story, and I'm glad that I read it, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Star Wars Volume 1 by Jason Aaron. This is a very long-running comic series. I want to say there are 9 volumes that are currently out. This also takes place right after the events of A New Hope, but it tells more of like what's going on with Luke Skywalker and Vader, and it shows Vader kind of learning who Luke Skywalker is, and I actually read it right after Andrew and I watched A New Hope on May the 4th, so then I was really excited to jump into Empire Strikes Back, like having these extra scenes in my mind. I still have to continue reading the rest of the volumes of the series that are out, but I was really pleasantly surprised because I've said in the past that I found some of the Star Wars comics to be enjoyable, but nothing like great, and I really truly enjoyed this first volume, so that was amazing. And I ended up giving the first volume 4 stars. Then I read Kiss Me at the Stroke of Midnight volumes 5, 6, 7, and 8 by Rin Mikimoto, and this is a series that follows a girl in high school, and she ends up having kind of a chance meeting with this guy who used to be in a boy band, but he drops out to be an actor, and their romance is super cute, and they're constantly facing a ton of obstacles, especially with him being in show business. There's always people that are trying to break them up. They aren't able to see each other very often. They have to keep their relationship a secret, and it's just such a cute series, and I love it so much, and I'm so sad that the next couple volumes aren't out yet. I believe it's a completed series. I can't remember if there are 10 or 12 volumes in total. They're all supposed to be published in the United States with like by the end of the year, so I will be completing it shortly. But yeah, I read these so quick too. Like I think it takes me like a half an hour or so to read a full volume. I like just read one after another, after another, after another. Couldn't put them down. I think this is one of the best current running series of manga, and I gave each of these like between 3.5 to 4 stars each. Then I decided that I really wanted to catch up on Saga because I was woefully behind, so I reread volume 1, I reread volume 2, and then I read volumes 3, 4, 5, and 6, all the volumes, and Saga just continues to like blow me away. I think this is such an amazing sci-fi series. I still have 3 volumes left to read until I'm current, and the creators are taking a break from the series at the moment, but I believe they're going to be getting back to it next year, I want to say. So I'm definitely going to catch up and hopefully stay on top of it as it's released instead of waiting until it's released, like collected in volumes. But I, again, read these so quick. Kind of like a romance, and it follows Alana and Marco, and they have this child, and their races are at war with one another, so she's kind of like a forbidden child, and they're constantly on the run, they're constantly getting separated, and there's just such a great cast of characters. There's a whole bunch that's going on in other plot lines with other characters, but I enjoy every single one of them. It's one series where I honestly look forward to every single narrative, and I'm so invested in what's going on with each of the characters. I know like everyone talks about the series, but it's honestly like one of the best comic series that I've ever read in my life. And I gave all of these between 4.5 and 5 stars each. Then I read Blackbird Volume 1 by Sam Humphries and Jen Bartel. I love Jen Bartel's artwork, so that was why I initially picked this one up, and I ended up loving this first volume so much. It follows a girl named Nina Rodriguez who lives in Los Angeles with her family, and her mother passed away, so it's just her and her sister, and Nina has taken it kind of hard. She kind of relies on drugs and alcohol to escape from the real world, but she has this memory of something magical that happened one night to her in her past, and everyone has thought that she is crazy, and they've called her like crazy baby ever since then, but she keeps getting these hints of like how what she saw was real, and there is magic that is happening like behind the scenes, and she is kind of obsessed with finding that magic and being a part of that world, and her family ends up being kind of connected with it. But it was just such a solid start to the series. The artwork and the colors are just amazing. Like, this is like the title page, but the fashion in it is absolutely stunning. There's like really cool magical creatures. Look at that cover. Like this whole thing was just so good, and I ended up loving this. I am for sure continuing the series, and I ended up giving this volume 5 stars. Then I read Kanan Volume 1 and Kanan Volume 2 by Greg Weisman. This is another Star Wars comic series, and this is actually just a 2-volume story arc following the character Kanan, who is in Star Wars Rebels. It tells his story. The first one's called The Last Padawan, so it's all about him and his Jedi Master, who was Depa Billaba, and they go to this planet and Order 66 kicks in, and obviously everything changes for him then, and he's kind of on the run, and it's all about how he survived. And then they do have characters from Rebels within it because it kind of flip-flops between past and present. So he has to revisit the planet as an adult and carry out this mission as part of Rebels. So you get a little bit more of that in the second volume, and then you see some characters from his past resurface, and I just thought it was really well done. I really love Kanan. He was one of my favorite characters on Rebels. Hera was my favorite, but he was definitely up there too. And I ended up giving both of these volumes 4 stars. Then I read Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and this was another Star Wars comic series that I ended up loving. Like, I thought the Easter eggs in it were so great. I thought the artwork was fantastic. I felt like it was such an amazing exploration of Vader's character. This story takes place right after Revenge of the Sith, so it's following Vader and Palpatine, and Vader is just kind of coming to power within the Empire. There are people who are kind of like questioning whether he really deserves to be sitting next to Palpatine. We also get to see this older woman who was like the Jedi librarian of the archives. She was amazing, and I wish that we could get like a full book about her because she was honestly just like the coolest person. So he's going back and kind of hunting these Jedi who weren't necessarily killed off during Order 66 under Palpatine's orders, and he has several run-ins with a bunch of people, and it was really exciting, and I thought both volumes were amazing. There are actually 2 more volumes that I still have to read, but I loved these first 2, and I gave each of them 5 stars also. Then I read Tokyo Tarariba Girls Volume 2 by Akiko Higashimura, who's the author of Princess Jellyfish, and this is a new series that she was writing. I can't remember how many volumes are currently out, but I didn't really love the first volume. I got very interested at the end of the first volume, so I decided to give the second volume a chance too. And I still am kind of undecided on how I feel about it. It follows these 3 girls who meet every night. They're like best friends, and they all have had a lot of like failed relationships, so now they're kind of seen as like old maids, and they just go drinking and criticizing other people's life choices, and they all kind of want to be married by the Olympics in Tokyo. One of them meets like this young model and has a thing with him. Another one of them, you get to find out like about her past relationship with this guy who's in a band. I liked that I got to know a little bit more about one of like the best friends in this book, but I still, like I said, I'm still just like kind of undecided about the series overall. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue and give the 3rd volume a chance and then potentially finish, but it was fine. It just wasn't anything like that really held my interest, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Then I read Happy Marriage Volumes 2 through 10. So I finished the series. This is actually a completed series. This is by Maki and Joji, and this follows a girl who marries the CEO of the company that she works at because apparently her grandmother was really nice to the CEO's grandfather, and he worked for her when he was younger, and she's the reason that he was able to start this company, and he's always had this dream of tying their families together. And he tells his grandson that he is not allowed to remain the CEO unless he marries this girl, and her father has gotten into a lot of debt, so he promises to take care of that for her if she marries his grandson. So the two of them kind of reluctantly agree to it, and it's all about them really like getting to know each other and having to navigate marriage, having no previous relationship with each other, and really like coming to care for one another despite being thrown into this circumstance in such a weird way. This story is like completely outlandish, and I could see a lot of people having issues with certain aspects of the story, but it was wildly entertaining, and it got a little thrillery toward the end, and his family is constantly like interfering with certain things because a bunch of people are trying to compete to be like the next chairman of the board, and you get to find out more about his past, and she really wants to like kind of be independent and still work and make decisions for herself, but also be a good wife. And I just thought it was really well done. Like I said, really entertaining, and this was one of the series that I wasn't really like rating. I would say probably overall it was like a 3-star series or 3.5-star series. I really enjoyed it while I was reading it, but it's definitely not something that I would revisit in the future. Then I read Midnight Secretary Volume 1 by Tomu Omi, and this one I did not really enjoy very much. It follows this girl, and she is the Midnight Secretary to this guy who is a vampire, and he kept saying like how plain she is and how he wanted like a better looking assistant. And the reason that she dresses the way she does is because she looks really young and she doesn't think that people will take her seriously. So she puts her hair in a bun and wears glasses even though she doesn't need them. And then obviously like when she takes her glasses off and her hair down, she's like this beautiful young girl, but she doesn't want to be seen that way. I think she has to like offer him some of her blood at one point because he's in a weird situation. It was weird. It was a really weird volume. It was okay, but it wasn't great. Not something that I think that I'm going to continue, and I did feel like he kept commenting too much on not liking her appearance, and he's supposed to be her boss, and like who cares what she looks like as long as she's doing her job. And obviously they're going to fall in love, like that's for sure gonna happen, but I just didn't love it, and I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read Everyone's Getting Married Volume 1, and this one I really enjoyed. This followed a girl who all she's ever wanted to do is get married, and she thinks that her boyfriend is going to propose to her, but then he ends up breaking up with her so that he can quit his job and try to become an actor and focus on himself, and she's pretty devastated. And then she meets this guy who's a newscaster, and he has to like maintain the air of being a bachelor because it's better for ratings, but clearly there's like something that's going on between them, but he says from the beginning that he never wants to get married. He doesn't believe in marriage. So she's like, well, I can't like him because all I want to do is get married, and he doesn't want to get married. And yeah, I'm definitely going to continue the series. I thought this was a really fun first volume, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read LDK Volume 1 by Ayu Watanabe, and this one was okay, but not great. It follows a girl who is living in this apartment, and she finds out that the prince of her grade is living next door to her, but he's kind of a jerk, and one of her friends actually professed her love to him, and he totally turned her down, and she had just confronted him about like being a jerk to her friend. And then the two of them realize they live next door to each other, and something happens. There's like some kind of fire, and they of course have to move in together until the other apartment can be fixed, and there's a love story brewing between them, and it was cute, but it wasn't anything that I was like, I need to read more of this. So I think I'm gonna give up on this one, and I gave this 3 stars. And then finally I read O Maidens in Your Savage Season Volume 1 by Mari Okada, and this follows a girl who's in a literature club in her high school, and all of them are kind of just discovering their sexuality and like getting curious about things because of the passages that they would read in classic books. And she has a neighbor that I think she's going to end up having something with. This was definitely on the more like risque side. I thought it was an enjoyable first volume. I'm definitely curious to see where the story's gonna go. This is actually the only volume that's out at the moment, but the second one I think is coming out very soon, and I do believe I'm gonna continue on, and I think I gave this one like 3.5 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in May. Like I said, it was a really weird reading month because usually I read a lot more novels and I just didn't. I read so much manga and so many graphic novels this month, and it was definitely nice to catch up on some of that stuff, but now in June I am ready to get back to all of the books that I have on my TBR. So yeah, let me know if you read anything that I mentioned, and I will see you guys soon in a new video. Bye!